Why the NBA is afraid of the Los Angeles Clippers. With the addition of John Wall alongside with a couple other players, in my opinion, I think the Clippers are set up to be a much better team this next season than they ever were since acquiring Paul George and Kawhi. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since the Clippers originally acquired both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they were instant championship contenders. But due to a major injury that kept Kawhi Leonard out last season and a couple of just straight up playoff failures, the Clippers have somewhat disappointed thus far. And at this point, I think a lot of fans have given up on the Clippers in terms of them being legitimate championship contenders, but in my opinion, I think the Clippers are setting themselves right back up to be legitimate championship contenders this upcoming season. But why do I think this? Well, I think this for a couple different reasons, but starting with the main reason is the addition of John Wall. Now, obviously in the past, John Wall was known as a superstar type guy, and at this point, he's certainly not that player anymore due to a bunch of different injuries, but I still think he is going to be a very serviceable player and a legitimate starting level player for the Clippers. Now, whether that means the Clippers actually end up starting him or just have him come off the bench, that's kind of besides the point, but I think the level of play that he is going to be at is definitely going to be at the very least an okay starting level guy. Because at this point, I still see John Wall as a really good passer and playmaker that can run the pick and roll or the pick and pop to perfection, and he's also going to be a player that could still score pretty effectively, and I could see him averaging anywhere from 10 to 14 points a game for the Clippers. But the great thing about Wall is he does have a decent amount of playoff experience, so in the clutch late in games, having a player like that obviously facilitates very effectively is going to be such a beneficial thing for the Clippers. And having the ball in John Wall's hands in certain possessions where the Clippers are struggling offensively is definitely going to make everybody else's life a lot easier. Now, obviously, there's a chance that the John Wall experiment doesn't work in Los Angeles, but it was definitely a risk that I think was worth taking due to the upside of John Wall. But if I had to guess at this point, I would say the addition of John Wall is going to be a very good one. Now, the next reason why I think the rest of the NBA may be scared of the Clippers this next season is due to the depth that they do have. Now, whenever you're building a championship contender, the first thing that you really need to look at is your top level talent. But after you identify those players, the next thing that you need to look at, and the real differentiating factor between teams that win a championship and teams that come up short, is the quality of depth that you put around those stars. And I would definitely say in the past that the Clippers had some decent depth on the roster, but I would say at this point the quality of players they have is just a little bit better than they have had in the past. When you talk about guys like Reggie Jackson, Norman Powell, Terrence Mann even, Zubats, Luke Kennard, Rocco, and there's just so many different players on this roster that either spread the floor very effectively or just play very well with their star players, or even some of these guys have a nice ability to score for themselves. And the reason why that's important is now you can have your star players in PG and Kawhi on the bench for an extended amount of time, and you don't necessarily need to be worried about your team losing the lead they already had, or if they were down, you don't need to worry about them getting blown out. They definitely have some very legitimate players coming off the bench. Now, the next reason why I think the rest of the NBA may be scared of the Clippers is due to that extra year of experience that a lot of their guys did get together. Now, obviously, none of their players are rookies, and most of their guys have already had a lot of NBA experience in the past, so why would one extra season of NBA experience matter all that much? Well, a lot of times when you bring in a bunch of new players, or even a couple of new players, it takes around a season or maybe even two to really feel comfortable with those new guys and really form a chemistry together. So I think the fact that they had last year, and in some players' cases 2 or 3 seasons, to really play together and really gain that chemistry together is definitely going to be a huge benefit to them going forward. And maybe if they didn't have that chemistry fully down with a couple guys last year, it would get better this year and maybe they would be fully comfortable with their teammates now. But I think the most important thing from last year in terms of experience is that playoff failure, and typically when you go through a playoff failure like that, it really serves as a learning experience for the future. Now obviously a guy like Kawhi Leonard didn't play at all last year, so he wouldn't have that extra year of experience with these new guys, but I think when you're talking about a guy like Kawhi Leonard, I don't think he's necessarily going to have an issue fitting in with these new players, and I think he's just going to come right back into the Clippers and do what he does best, which is score very effectively from that 3-point range, score extremely effectively from that mid-range, do a really nice job at driving all the way to the basket, even showing off his new passing and playmaking ability that he really has shown in the past couple seasons, while also dominate on the defensive side of the court, which is something that we all know he already can do. And I don't think that ACL injury is really going to affect him all that much once he does come back next year. And I could definitely see him even getting better than he was in the past. But overall, even though all these other factors are nice, like the decent coaching that they do have, like the pretty good depth that they have on the roster, like the extra year of experience they have under their belt, all those things are definitely nice, but at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to their two stars in Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. If they play well in the playoffs, they're going to go very far and have a really good chance to win a championship. But if they don't play well, it's going to fall on their shoulders and they're probably not going to win an NBA championship or even play all that well in the playoffs. Now, obviously, out of those two guys with Kawhi and PG, you're going to be a little more concerned about Paul George, as Kawhi always plays well in the playoffs, but Paul George has certainly struggled a tremendous amount in the playoffs as of late, which is definitely something that you don't like to see from one of your star guys, but you would at the very least hope that he would play better in the playoffs this next season, as Kawhi will be back presumably and will take a lot of pressure off his shoulders. Now obviously, even when Kawhi was playing in the past, Paul George still didn't play well in the playoffs, but when you also consider the added level of depth and the quality of depth that they did add to the roster, that should take a decent amount of pressure off Paul George's shoulders and hopefully help him play better in the playoffs. But if both of these players are able to play at a very high level in the playoffs, it's going to be basically a nightmare to go up against this Clipper team, as they are so talented, but they've been talented for a long time. It's really going to come down to Paul George, in my opinion. He is the X factor. And if at the end of the season, the Clippers come up short once again, and I'm not talking about not winning an NBA championship, I'm saying if the Clippers lose in the first or second round once again, I would heavily consider trading away Paul George, assuming that he played pretty poorly in the playoffs once again. And maybe even if it wasn't his fault, I would still heavily consider it, just due to the fact that at that point, it would be obvious that the pairing between him and Kawhi Leonard is just not working out. And if one of them had to go, obviously it's going to be Paul George, as Kawhi is one of the top players in the league. And at that point, I would look to acquire another star via free agency, or maybe even in that trade for Paul George. But overall, at this point, I am very excited about the Clippers, and I definitely do think they could be legitimate championship contenders. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the rest of the NBA should be scared of the Clippers, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.